It is Monday, May 25th, 2026, the 145th day of the year, and we are finally starting to come up for air after what has genuinely been one of the most relentless and exhausting stretches of severe weather that I can remember covering on this channel. As of this morning, the damage survey teams are still out across parts of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri, cataloging what last week's outbreak actually produced, and the numbers are not pretty. We have at least 12 confirmed fatalities across 6 states from the tornado and wind damage events that rolled through Wednesday and Thursday. More than 310,000 people woke up this morning, still without power across a corridor stretching from the Central Plains through the Ohio Valley and into parts of the Mid-Atlantic. The tornado that tracked through the southeastern Nebraska sandhills on Wednesday evening has been preliminarily rated EF3 with a path length of over 38 miles and a maximum width approaching 750 yards. There were multiple additional significant tornado reports across Iowa and Missouri on Thursday, and the survey work on those is still ongoing this morning. Down in the Tennessee Valley, the straight-line wind damage from Thursday night's squall line was absolutely staggering, with gusts that measured 76 miles per hour at a monitoring station just south of Nashville. Some of those neighborhoods in the suburban Nashville corridor are going to be cleaning up for weeks. And then the ice. Let us talk about the ice for a second, because I do not think enough people are talking about what happened across parts of northern Arkansas and southern Missouri, with freezing rain accumulations of nearly 3/4 of an inch in some locations. That is the kind of ice accumulation that brings down mature trees and power lines wholesale, and some of those communities are not going to have power restored for another week to 10 days. This pattern we started tracking way back at the beginning of May verified in a way that was honestly harder to watch than I expected. And unfortunately, it is not time to rest yet because another big storm may be coming, so let us get into it. Let me start with where things stand temperature-wise right now, because the cold air that came crashing in behind Thursday's cold front is still very much in place across a huge portion of the country. And I want to make sure people understand how serious the cold still is, particularly for the communities that are sitting without power this Memorial Day. Morning. Tomorrow morning, we are going to be looking at overnight lows of 27 degrees in Kansas City, 25 degrees in Des Moines, 23 degrees in Sioux Falls, up across the Minnesota Iron Range. From Hibbing through Virginia and International Falls, we are talking about temperatures dropping to 17 and 18 degrees tomorrow morning. And these are not wind chill values. These are actual air temperatures. And then look at this. Nashville tomorrow morning is going to struggle to reach 31 degrees during the day on Tuesday. We might briefly touch 33 degrees Tuesday afternoon, and then we go right back down to 28 degrees for Wednesday morning. There are people in Nashville right now who have been without power since Thursday night, sitting in homes that have been dropping in temperature every single hour, and they are going into another night below freezing, and then another one after that. If you are in the Nashville area and you know someone who is elderly or who is in a home without heat right now, please check on them today, because this is genuinely life-threatening cold for people in those circumstances. The same situation applies across the Missouri boot heel, across northern Arkansas, and into the western Kentucky and southern Illinois communities that took the brunt of the ice accumulation. These are not just inconvenience outages. These are dangerous situations for vulnerable people, and the cold is not releasing its grip anytime soon. And I know it is Memorial Day. I know people had cookouts planned and outdoor events scheduled and lake trips on the calendar. This is not the Memorial Day weekend anybody ordered, and I'm sorry about that. But please, take the cold seriously today and check on the people around you. Now, let me zoom out and talk about the bigger pattern picture, because I think understanding what is driving all of this is really important for understanding what comes next. We have been locked in this brutal ridge trough pattern for going on 3 weeks now, where a dominant upper-level ridge is parked over the western United States, keeping things warm and dry out there while a persistent trough digs down over the central and eastern part of the country and keeps dragging cold Canadian air mass after cold Canadian air mass down across the northern tier and into the southern plains and the Tennessee Valley. And here is the frustrating thing about this kind of atmospheric setup. It tends to be self-reinforcing. The ridge gets stronger, and that forces the trough to dig deeper, and that pulls more cold air south, and that sets up more storm systems, and the whole cycle keeps going. Out west right now, while we are sitting here on Memorial Day in the aftermath of a devastating severe weather week, Los Angeles is enjoying 79 degrees. Tucson is going to touch 85 degrees this afternoon. Las Vegas is looking at highs in the mid-80s through the weekend, and I am not saying that to make anyone jealous, although I completely understand if it does. I am saying it because that warmth out west is actually part of the same pattern that is keeping us cold and active in the east, and that pattern is not going anywhere anytime soon. The extended outlooks are keeping below average temperatures in place across the southeast, the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Great Lakes region through at least the next 10 days. Some of those temperature anomalies for the upper Midwest and Great Lakes are running 12 to 15 degrees below average for the last week of May. That is extraordinary. And it is the kind of cold that can still do real agricultural damage, even this late in the spring season. Which brings me to the next storm, and I want to be very careful about how I present this because we are still at a range where the fine details are genuinely uncertain, and I do not want anyone getting too emotionally attached to any single model solution. But the signal is there, and it is consistent enough across multiple model runs that I would be doing you a disservice if I did not tell you about it right now while you still have time to prepare. The European model has been showing a significant high-pressure system building across central Canada over the next 48 to 72 hours. And this high is going to be sending another reinforcing shot of cold air southward into the northern plains and upper Midwest by this weekend. That cold air mass is not particularly unusual on its own at this point in the pattern. What makes it more concerning is what happens when that cold Canadian air meets the moisture that is going to be streaming northward out of the Gulf of Mexico along the western periphery of the high-pressure system. The models are showing that moisture interaction developing into a low-pressure system that begins organizing across the lower Mississippi Valley by late Saturday into Sunday. And here's where I want you to pay close attention, because this is where the two main models are telling two very different stories right now, and understanding that difference matters a lot for what you should be preparing for. The European model takes that developing low-pressure system and tracks it northeast through the Tennessee Valley and into the Ohio Valley, and then up the Appalachian spine toward the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. If that solution verifies, you are looking at significant snow accumulations across the higher elevations of the Appalachians, potentially impactful ice accumulation across parts of the Tennessee Valley and the Carolina Piedmont, and a significant nor'easter-type setup that could bring heavy snow to the immediate coastal areas from Virginia Beach up through Long Island and into southern New England by early next week. The European model has been the more accurate of the two models during this entire pattern, and if you remember back to the storms we tracked earlier this month, the GFS was consistently too far east and too weak with the precipitation, and the European was the one that correctly anticipated the magnitude of what actually happened. So when I tell you to pay attention to what the European model is showing right now, I want you to take that seriously. The GFS, on the other hand, takes a similar initial low-pressure development across the lower Mississippi Valley, but then tracks it much farther east, much faster, and keeps the heaviest precipitation offshore, with a weaker and less impactful storm affecting the coastal regions. The truth is probably somewhere between those two solutions, and it is going to take another 24 to 48 hours of model runs before we have the confidence to start talking about specific snow totals or ice accumulation amounts for specific cities. Do not get too attached to any specific number right now, but do start thinking about the possibility that another significant winter weather event could be arriving at the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast by Monday into Tuesday of next week. For the southern tier and the Tennessee Valley, the question with this next system is going to be less about snow and more about freezing rain and ice. And honestly, I think that is the more concerning outcome for that region right now. Another significant ice event across communities that are already partially without power from last week's storm, where the infrastructure is already compromised and the repair crews are already stretched thin, would be genuinely catastrophic for some of those areas. I am watching the temperature profiles across Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky very carefully over the next several days, and if this low tracks the way the European model suggests, the thermal setup for an icing event across that region is going to be in place. Freezing rain does not get the dramatic coverage that tornadoes do, and it does not produce the visual spectacle of a blizzard, but 3/4 of an inch of ice on power lines and tree branches that are already stressed from the previous event is an extremely serious and potentially life-threatening outcome for those communities. Keep watching the forecast for that region very closely through the end of this week. Now, I also want to talk about lake effect because there is another piece of this pattern that is going to be very significant for specific communities over the next several days, regardless of what the next storm system does. All of this cold air that keeps pouring, swing through the Great Lakes on Tuesday, is going to crank those lake effect snow machines back up to full intensity in some locations downwind of Lake Superior. And Lake Ontario could be looking at an additional 12 to 18 inches of snow on top of what they already have on the ground from earlier this week. If you are in the lake effect belts of western Michigan through Traverse City and Cadillac, or in the Syracuse and Watertown corridor of upstate New York, this is not a week to be making unnecessary travel plans because those lake effect bands can produce whiteout conditions with zero visibility and 2 to 3 inches of snowfall per hour at the absolute peak. Here is where everything stands as of this Memorial Day morning on May 25th, 2026. The aftermath of last week's outbreak is still being cataloged, and it is serious. 12 confirmed fatalities, 310,000 people without power and temperatures that are going to drop below, freezing again tonight and again tomorrow night. An EF3 tornado track across southeastern Nebraska, devastating ice accumulation across the Missouri and Arkansas boot heel. The cold pattern that drove all of this is locked in and not releasing for at least another 10 days across the central and eastern United States. Lake effect snow is going to keep pounding the Great Lakes downwind shores through the weekend. And somewhere out there across the lower Mississippi Valley by late Saturday into Sunday, a new low pressure system is trying to organize. And the European model thinks it could become another significant and impactful winter weather event for the Tennessee Valley, the Appalachians, and the Northeast by early next week. I'm going to have a dedicated update video on that developing system as soon as the models come into better agreement and the details sharpen up, because right now the uncertainty is still too high to start throwing out specific snow totals for specific cities. But the signal is real and it is consistent, and you need to be aware of it. Enjoy your Memorial Day as best you can. Check on your neighbors. And thank you so much for the incredible support during last week's coverage. We could not do what we do here without you watching and sharing and staying engaged through all of it. Slap a like on this video. Subscribe if you have not already. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.